Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jen, for being here. Jen MacLure, CEO of My Pathway to College. She's going to be talking to us tonight about navigating the college admissions and hacking the black box of the college admissions process.
Oh,
So
thank you.
thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Michael, for having me. And it is a bit smaller of a group tonight. I think we're going to be recording it to send it out to a few more people. But if you have questions, because it is smaller, feel free to unmute and ask away. Or you can also leave a message in the chat box and during my presentation. And then I'm definitely going to leave a lot of time after for any questions that you have. Um, so if you prefer to just kind of wait till the end, that is definitely an option too. And I am going to get started. Okay, let me just move this over. Okay, so there we go. A little delay with the technology. I was like, where did it go? So today I wanted to chat with everyone about the changing landscape of college admissions, mainly because this has been a big theme with COVID, and I thought it could be helpful for us to discuss the changes after, um, you know, with the pandemic and see how that has affected admissions. So there can be positives and negatives with everything. And with the impact of COVID, I think Marvel Maxwell says it the best from University of Houston, disruption often creates opportunity. And with that, there's been changes to testing. So colleges now are, right now, many are test optional. Some are even test blind, meaning they will not even look at SAT or ACT testing. And then some are requiring testing. So MIT and certain colleges have announced that they do find value in an admission test score. So it's really all over the map, which can be advantageous for some, and but then at the same time, it can create a little bit of uncertainty for families trying to figure out what to do regarding testing. But I'm going to go over that in our presentation today. And a positive has also been there's been more ways to connect with admissions. So college admission counselors have prepared these great college visit information sessions. That way families don't have to travel all the way to, across um, the states to different and to check out different colleges and spend a lot of money trying to visit these schools. They can really get a great experience virtually. And then if you decide you want to, you can then go and visit the campus in person. But it's nice to be able to experience the school before investing resources and time during all those college visits. And it's just a nice way to show your demonstrated interest with this school too. And I do feel like there's been even just more access to for college admissions. So some students that maybe weren't able to apply to schools because of testing are having a bit more access to it. And the requirements, colleges have, some are not requiring as many letters of recommendation, especially with the result of COVID and some students not knowing their teachers very well. So there's just been a little shift in hard requirements. Things have become a little bit more flexible and open. And so now this, like at the same time, then the negative is that the students and parents are now more anxious because of these uncertainties with the college admissions process. So I've been seeing more and more students applying to, I would say 4 years ago, it was maybe like, 8 to 10 colleges. And now with student lists, it could be, 12 to 16 colleges. So students are definitely like applying to more colleges because of this uncertain college admissions process. And that has heightened concern with families of just not knowing the different steps within admissions of like, okay, now that it's test optional. So for a couple of years, we were kind of in a new playing ground, and that's where that uncertainty came with students applying to more colleges. I do feel that in years to come, it's going to start to go down because families and students will understand the process again. It was just, we were in such a new time. That's why students were applying to so many more colleges. But then the impact of that has been students are, because they are applying to so many more colleges, the college admission offices are just getting inundated with applications. And it's resulted in deferrals or wait lists, and colleges also moving more towards early decision versus early action, which I'll get into on the next slide of what that means. And then the college admissions testing varying by college. So really having those changes too has been another piece that's kind of created a little bit of uncertainty for families. And the other negative we found just with COVID is students that are a bit less engaged. And I don't know if this is like the COVID, the effect of COVID, of just that virtual learning. But college admission counselors and college administrators have been saying that students coming in to college have been more concerned about earning a degree than learning. And in prior years, they felt like students were more engaged in the learning process. And so that's where I feel like Giant Leaps Learning is doing such an amazing job of really engaging students, making sure that they're actively involved in their high school experience, activities, asking those right questions and being more engaged. So that shift, I feel like, is going to be hopefully happening soon now that they are more in the classroom. And then programs like Giant Leaps are going to be also helping on kind of switching that issue and crisis that I feel like we currently are in, with students being a bit disconnected.
Jen, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Would you say, do you think that's a result of what happened with COVID, or is that just is that something separate? I suppose kids being more disconnected when the pressure on them, or what do you think is different about why they're missing the point of college now versus a couple of years ago? Or
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of all speculative, but I do feel that from what I've even been seeing with students and even in conversations with college admission counselors, they shared that students, after virtual learning and being out of the classroom, a little bit more sheltered, in like not having as many activities or things that they could get involved in. They've noticed that students are a little bit less apt to take a risk, or they need a little bit more encouragement, hand-holding for the current college students right now that they're seeing.
I have a question as well.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter actually went through the Giant Leaps program, and that really helped open her eyes to how incredible learning can be outside of the traditional school environment. And in turn, what she's expressed to us is she thinks high school is a waste of time. So she's not, while she's getting amazing grades, doing great on the PSAT, she's had really good scores, she's doing amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but she's not involved in the high school life and activities and clubs and all that stuff. So is that detrimental for her in the application process?
It could. I do think it could be helpful for her to also get engaged in at least one club on campus, just so that way it does show that she wants to become involved on their within a college setting too. Because oftentimes when college admission offices are looking over applications, they're looking at their current activities, because it will be predictive of what they might be interested in getting involved in during college. And so if they see that they're involved in their campus community, they're wanting students that will be engaged in campus activities too. But if there's a lot of outside activities, like with the Giant Leaps Learning, that's showing her initiative. So I typically will tell students to find something. You don't have to have like a ton of have all of your activities with in the school environment. But if they could find maybe like a club that interests and can kind of tie into their story with their applications, that would be nice.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. So I think that's where I feel like I'm hoping that more and more programs and more students will become involved in programs like Giant Leaps, and that there'll be more opportunities for students to get engaged now that we are not as virtual anymore, and that students can enter clubs and do things like that. It can really be helpful. And so ways kind of to have this discussion about, okay, the purpose of college, and letting students know too that being engaged in like common experiences, service activities, connecting with others. So and like the Giant Leaps program definitely is a great example, but I do feel that more conversations that shift about college being like, just like your daughter was saying about, I don't like high school, so just I have to go through the motion. But college, you can explore your interests. You can double major, you can minor. So many more colleges are becoming interdisciplinary, where you can kind of craft your own education. That's going to be, I think, really exciting for students too, and letting them know that there's going to be a lot more autonomy. So I know I talked about before early decision versus regular decision. And this is another change that's happened recently. So early decision means it's binding. If you apply early decision, then you are committing to having to attend that college. So you apply early, typically like November 1. You sign an agreement that you are committing to that college. And if you choose to you then have to attend that college if you are then accepted to that college. The only way out of an early decision agreement would be if it is financially a burden. Then you could then share information with the college, but the family has to fill out an agreement for early decision as well. So it's a binding contract with the college. For colleges, they've been liking that, because then it's a for sure bet on a student going to attend their school. Because right now, with the increase in applications, colleges are a little bit unsure of who is interested. And so if they pull from their early decision pool, then they know how to fill that class. And so that has been more of a strategy recently with several colleges, if they offer early decision, that I've seen a large increase in colleges accepting early decision applicants just because of the increase in applications.
So I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
No, you please.
I'm just so if that's the case, if she were to apply for early decision, can she apply to multiple schools for early decision? And then no, she cannot.
No. So for early decision, you can only pick one college early decision. You can still apply early action to other colleges, which early action is non-binding, meaning you can apply early. If you get admitted early, you're in, which is a great feeling, but you don't have to make that decision until May 1st. So you can review all of your options. So you can still apply early decision to a school and early action and regular decision. But if you gain admission to the early decision school, you then have to withdraw your applications from all other colleges.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. So you really don't get to know, really
where else you could have,
yeah, and even the financial offers and everything too. So
right.
So really, I only will have a student apply early decision if they are just 100% committed and it's hard because most teenagers are not always 100% committed. But if they have been dreaming about a school from day one, and they have visited several times, it's a school that they would feel really devastated not gaining admission into, and it could significantly increase their chances. Like, for example, Tulane admitted 2/3 of its class through early decision. So if I have a student that's like, I love Tulane, I would do anything to go there, finances are not an issue, I want to apply, to Tulane early decision, that could really be an advantage. However, Tulane also offers early action, and so they could try the early action route instead too. But again, 2/3 were just recently admitted early decision because the colleges are getting so many applicants. And I do think this will start to go down. I'm hopeful for that, but the last 2 years have shown an increase in early decision rates because it's easier to predict enrollment.
And deadlines for that are senior year, November 1st?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And early action tends to be November 1st too.
Oh, they're okay.
Mhm. And so what happened with Northeastern recently, they had around 90,000 applicants this past year, and only 6.7% were admitted, which is crazy because just like I would say 4 years ago, they were closer to 30% admit rate. And so that kind of significant drop is interesting, but it's because of their over enrollment. So they have concerns of overcrowding right now.
So is there more people applying, so which drops the percentage down, or is it the same people applying and they're just taking fewer people?
It's like having, I always think of it like with like a airline being overbooked. So there's too many, there's too many people interested and not enough seats to be able to help the students gain admission. And so because they've over enrolled, they just don't have enough space. And so they're having to lower their admission just probably for the next few years until they can get back to being able to handle how many. What happened with Northeastern is they just recently started doing early decision. So I think they accepted several early decision. They then also accepted several early action and then didn't realize how many students were going to accept them. And that's why so many schools, they have to be careful with that. Looking at, and that's why there's been more deferrals. And because it's not that the student isn't able to, the student could be a great applicant, but if they're just worried about, okay, we have to protect our class size, we can't have an over enrollment issue, then that's why they're pulling a few from ED, they're moving several to regular admission, and then they may even deferring them into regular admission, or they may waitlist some just so they can kind of play with the numbers as they go.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But that's something I think just to be aware of. So that way, if there is a college that you feel, when you hear early decision, early action, and regular admission, there's different strategies that you can use with college admission. And I often find when applying, especially out of state for early action, that's where you can also get more scholarships. So there's more money if you are able to have your application prepared early. And so for my students, I really do encourage them, if they can, get a lot done the summer prior to their senior year. So then they're ready to go by November 1 and submit maybe even in like mid-October, just to have the extra potential for scholarships. And hearing back in December or January is such a good feeling versus having to wait till March.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stress with, I think, college admissions, and the kids don't always share that they're stressed, but once you see that they have like a college admission and they're in, they just like, you can just see everything melt. They're like, okay, I have a home.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And now even if it's not their top choice, it's still just a nice feeling of like, okay, I've gained admission, and now let's look at some of these other options
Yeah.
too. Okay, so now with that, it is really important to think about cost. So when looking at a college list and working with families, I always like to think about not just the academic fit or the social fit, but the financial fit too. There's quite a few schools that could have like they're going to be really expensive. Like a Chapman, they've really increased their tuition, but they give a lot of scholarships as well. And so for their top applicants, they're able to award some great scholarship offers because they've continued to keep increasing their tuition. But then that for a student maybe is not quite meeting the scholarship amount, that's going to be potentially like a full price ticket. And then there's some schools that are out of state, and you can look at like the UCs. All of these costs are tuition, room and board, food, kind of overall college expenses. And typically the UC and state schools are going to be around like that 38 to 30,000 range. And you can see if you apply to some schools, they're called like a WUI school. We have several colleges on the Western states that are part of what's called a WUI scholarship, where you can attend for almost in-state tuition. It's a little bit more than their in-state, but it ends up being around 40,000, which is pretty comparable to a UC price. You're also oftentimes have the opportunity for being able to graduate in 4 years, where at UC and state schools, they're impacted. And so there could be, I know SDSU, they tell you it could be 5 or 6 years to graduate just because they have so many students and not enough, kind of same issue with over enrollment where they don't have enough space in the classes.
Wow. So, if I understand that correctly, because they're over enrolled, or it would take longer. You're paying 50% more potentially than you would in it. Wow.
Yes, exactly. So that's where sometimes I'll work with families and I'll say, okay, well, if cost is a factor, we may want to consider some of these other partnering states where you could get a significant scholarship. And there's some schools too, like I know TCU and Baylor and Miami University and Oxford, Ohio, they'll actually share on their websites specific requirements. If you have this GPA or this test score, you'll be awarded the presidential scholarship. And that's nice to know too. So there's certain colleges you can add to the list if you are trying to keep your options open with scholarships too. And then
how do we know when trying to build our list, how do we know you're saying UCs and like San Diego State schools are so impacted and it could take longer than 4 years? Is there a way to know that that's the case?
Yeah, so there are some you can look at the graduation rates for the colleges, and there's also in terms of the cost, every college has what's called a net price calculator to figure out how much would your family have to pay for that college. And so when I am preparing college lists for students, I always will have the families check each college and make sure, okay, is this going to be an affordable option for our family? And that can be really helpful, just so then they have a better idea of the cost. When you're entering in on the calculator, you have to have your taxes from the prior year. You're entering in your student's GPA, their ACT or SAT if they have one, and then it will let you know if there's going to be any scholarships with that award.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there would you say what's the best aggregator of information, like to be able to kind of get a sense of the schools and pricing and that sort of thing? Is there a resource or an aggregator online or?
Mm-hmm. Typically, and so I normally will work with students on at least when I'm working with students, I'll work with them on identifying the academic fit, the social fit. But there are some resources, and I can share them with you just to send you some links of resources too that to look at. That's great in terms of pulling information with like cost and then part of like working with a independent college counselors myself is I visit about 20 colleges per year. And so I have a lot of information about each of the colleges in terms of the academic environment, the social fit, and then also just, over the years, I think I've now been doing this 15 years, over the years, just all of the trends and then also the scholarships knowledge too. So that's where it can be helpful to meet with a counselor just to even if it is just to create a college list for that reason, and being able to have access to more information with a I also give families, I have a college counseling software program where it gives them information for each school and a lot of research tools. But I'll make sure I'm going to make a note to send you that that link too.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. That's helpful.
And then another great idea, especially when trying to narrow down your colleges, is to begin visiting colleges. And I'll share this presentation with you afterwards too. So if you wanted to send it to any families, that way you don't have to jot down all of these questions. But I find that with college visits, the best way to ask questions is to not just ask generic questions like, how many students are in a classroom, like things you can normally find online. It's not going to really make that kind of a impression with college admissions. So if you are meeting with college admissions, they look at demonstrated interest. So some colleges, and it could be helpful to stand out during your visit. And to do so, I always say, like, do it the giant leaps learning way by showing critical thinking and really asking questions that are going to dive a little bit deeper. So questions that aren't going to be on the website that you can easily find. And so I have a few examples about questions that are going to be a bit more engaging and give you a better idea of the campus culture, the type of experience students have, what to expect at that school. And I think even just in terms of like your return on investment, like are students being able to, are there a lot of alumni connections? Are you going to be connected with internships? So things like that I think could be helpful beyond just the, oh wow, this campus is beautiful. And and they feel like on a lot of campus visits, they'll take you to like the, let's go check out a dorm room or the rock climbing wall. And after a while, they're like, okay, these visits are starting to look the same. But if you start asking specific questions, then you can really make your campus visit more impactful.
These are fantastic questions. Yeah, I love seeing this list.
Oh, good. And with college visits, I find students really, even if they've done the virtual visits, being on campus, it's just such a different experience. You really get to not only see the campus, but you get to see, go outside, maybe have lunch in the community, kind of get a feel for what the community is like too. And then engage with some students on campus, see if they're approachable, how your students feeling there on the campus, and maybe even making some connections with admissions. If you have further questions, you have a email that you can reach out to and engage with them during that time of that application period. So this will be a way to narrow down your visits, because once you visit a few schools, you're going to have a better idea of what is what's going to be that right fit. And it's hard to tell, because sometimes I'll think students will want a certain type, or they'll tell me they want a certain type of environment. And I always on a college list will add let's add a couple other schools just to see if they end up liking maybe that smaller campus, or maybe they like they'll say, oh, I only want the large social school. And then next thing you know, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna throw in a couple small, we'll see what you think. Oh, you liked it. And then we kind of start talking about it and shifting their list. So there's times where the list can change quite a bit, especially if I'm starting earlier on with the students.
How many schools on average do I don't want to say most students, but the students you work with end up visiting? What's a good kind of cross section?
Yeah, I mean, and because the college visits can get a little bit expensive, but I do find once you have narrowed down the colleges of interest, if you can even visit like 3 or 4, it can be really helpful, because you can start to identify schools that are going to be that right fit. And especially if you are considering doing an early decision, you definitely want to visit the campus before committing. When looking at your college list, I always say try to have it be balanced. So making sure you have at least 2 likely or target kind of like likely schools. We no longer call them safeties, but like likely. And that means like a college where the student's GPA is maybe higher than the school's average. The admit rate is higher. And then a target school where maybe the student's GPA is right in their range, and then a target reach could be maybe the student's GPA is in their range, but the school's admit rate's a little bit lower, or the student maybe the admit rate is high, but the student's GPA is lower, then it would be a target reach. And then a reach would be one where it's either they, sometimes I have like for some students like Stanford, it was recently like 3% admit rate. I'm like, it's a reach for everyone, even my top applicants, because it's 3. And so that's where we will still, you still have to kind of like that one with it being so low, it's just going to be kind of on that reach end.
What are I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question, but what are some of the what distinguishes in that top 3%? What's a distinguishing factor? What is somebody looking for? What are they looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's where I also feel like Giant Leaps is a great. I know I keep giving you plugs, but I really do feel like your program is amazing, and the fact that students are doing something unique and different, and they're more engaged in their learning, that's a positive. And I've had students with acceptance to Stanford. It really is a student where it's not like just that, oh, we're a well-rounded student. It's that you really they're kind of above. It's like they are just the go-getters. They're always like, I'll have trouble even keeping up with them on their essays. Like they're just like sending me information. I'm like, okay. They're just the go-getters, the leaders in the classroom. I've had, in terms of activities, kind of programs that are giving back to the community, really making an impact. And then also just like a overall like love of learning, and showing engagement in their activities. Kind of, you can tell the different stories, like a passion for a subject or for a cause, and how they've gone. Maybe they've there's a few different pieces on their application where you can kind of see that theme weaved in.
Got it. So on some level, like they can demonstrate that they're engaged with learning, and that they can demonstrate that they're they're leaders in
Hmm.
the community.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And the letters of recommendation are another piece that is going to be important as well. And that's where I have like different tips for college admission success. So visiting the campus, showing your interest. I do recommend for, this is like just a tip for, I think, parents and students to kind of, one way of minimizing stress and anxiety with the college admissions process. I found with my families, I'll encourage like a one night, like maybe you pick the night for having that college discussion, especially in the senior year when probably all everyone is thinking is college applications and essays. And so designating a time that way you're not getting a constant eye roll or that kind of like, oh, why are we only talking about college right now? So it just allows for expectations with communication. And I also find it doesn't create too much extra stress for the student. They kind of know, okay, this is our college night and we're going to talk about.
I love that, Jen. That's something that I talk about a bunch with parents, and one of the things I suggest is exactly the same, but also the opposite. Is it's like designate times that are off limits to talk about this sort of thing. So, like, let's say family dinner on Sundays or whenever. Like at the dinner table, we're not talking about these. How I think of them as charged conversations that have like a charge to them.
Yeah,
So we designate times where we're not having those conversations, and we
yeah,
know that's like a safe space sort of thing.
absolutely. It's so healthy for kids. I think it can create this like a block in communication with parents and students. And so if you have like a specific night, then it's really helpful. And in terms of test taking, it's a little bit uncertain for a lot of families and students just because there's so many different changes. But overall, I still recommend students to take a practice SAT and a practice ACT, just so that way they can see where their score falls. They can see which test they would do best on, and then make that decision in terms of the colleges on their list. So if there are some schools, like the UC schools are completely test blind, they will not be looking at testing, but there's a lot of colleges that are test optional for this coming year and even the class of 2024. And some are still not sure for what they're going to do for 2025. So it's still a little bit up in the air for some of the other years. But that's why I think it is helpful to take a practice test, see which one's going to be best, and then the student can then start prepping towards that one test. They don't have to take both SAT and ACT because colleges will take either. Many colleges are also allowing for what's called a super score, where you can take let's say you take the ACT, decide on the ACT. You could take the ACT in September, and let's say you do really well on the math section, but not so well on the science or English. But then you take it again in November, and you do really well on the science and then the English section. You can super score it and get a higher score. So that can be really helpful just to average a higher score with colleges.
Are you seeing fewer and fewer schools, or what's the trend in testing and testing weight? I suppose are schools overall like starting to weigh that less, or more of them become test blind,
Mhm.
or yeah.
I've been finding more colleges to be operating towards test optional. That way it's allowed for more access. So um, with the with students that maybe can't afford to pay for test prep, it's really a disadvantage for them. And so colleges don't want to limit students. And so they have been finding that by being test optional, they're increasing their demographics. And so they've been liking that. However, I have been seeing an increase in students reporting testing to especially the more competitive schools. So trying to have that extra advantage for admission. And so that's where I am still encouraging to take an SAT or ACT, see how they do. If a college is test optional and this student does really well on that test and it's going to help them, great, submit it. If the student is maybe it's not even in the range, then they can apply test optional. So you can be strategic for each college, which is nice, and it allows that flexibility for the student.
Got it. Do you see that as a handy, like if a school is test optional and you don't submit a test score, what's your gut tell you about that being like a red flag, or about how does that sit,
Yeah, if a student has a high GPA, they have a lot of great extracurricular activities, and we feel like they're going to have a strong letter of rec, I feel fine with them not submitting a test score. If a student, maybe their GPA isn't quite to par with the college, also, then I would say, oh, that's going to be like, I would really encourage maybe having a test score that could be a higher data point.
Do you have recommendations on SAT versus ACT depending on potential majors?
Not regarding majors. Typically and I'll send that over to you as well. There's I have like a cheat sheet between the difference between SAT and ACT, and I'll send that over to Michael to share. And there's also, it was created by a local company here in San Diego, Score Builders, and they have some free practice tests that you can take with a link on there too. So that could be just helpful just to kind of get a feel for the difference between those two tests. But
thank you.
You're welcome. And typically, what I normally will recommend is having the student try them both, see which one they do best on. Because I've seen it's really more based on the student because there's more timing differences. So the SAT has a little bit more Common Core. So it's going to be a lot more reasoning and problem solving. So they give you more time to allow for that. There's also a section on the SAT math with no calculator. But the ACT is going to be a bit more straightforward, but it goes a lot faster.
It's interesting. I've gotten so much communication from the high school about my daughter's a junior, so taking the PSATs, which she's already done once, and now her second round of PSATs is coming up. I've seen no communication about the ACTs at all, which is so interesting. So I'm like, are they wanting her to wanting all their students to just do the SATs? Do you know anything along those lines?
Because the PSAT has like a national merit scholarship for juniors. So that's probably why they're encouraging it for right now. And I haven't seen very many schools offering, it's called like the plan. It's like a practice ACT. So most high schools will encourage the PSAT as either an indicator for the SAT or ACT, just to kind of get an idea of testing. But it doesn't mean that that high school is encouraging only SAT.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing I normally will wait for students, I don't have them take either the SAT or ACT until they've finished Algebra 2 or Integrated Math 2 Honors or Integrated Math 3, because they need to have the math skills in order to be successful in taking it.
Taking the actual ACT or SAT?
Yes.
The practice tests are okay, though.
Yes. Yeah, practice is fine. But
Okay.
in terms of, it would just be really frustrating, I think, taking a full SAT or ACT if you don't know the material.
Correct.
You haven't learned it yet. So
Yeah,
I'll help them. Yeah. So I try to set students up for success. So I'm like, okay, hold until you know the information, and then you can engage in test prep. And I also feel like if a test prep agency is going to accept you without having that math, that's also not a good indicator. Like a lot of the test prep companies I work with, they'll do the same thing. They'll say, okay, we'll take a student if they finish Integrated Math 2 Honors or Integrated Math 3 or Algebra 2, but they really don't want to have a student prior to that because they just don't have the math knowledge.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And just having another piece here is just discussing the college costs as a family. So that way everyone's on, kind of the same understanding that if there is a college that you're going to say, this is how much we have budgeted. And if you get into this school with this amount of scholarship, it'll work. But if not, then, we're going to have to look at your other options. That way they know going in. Or I've had some families, they'll tell me, well, there's no possible way we can afford, this one college. And for example, Georgetown, they're need-based only. So if you're applying to Georgetown and you're not going to qualify for need-based aid, and they're not going to give any merit scholarships, then why have a student and you go through that whole process if you know that you can't afford that college? It's just going to be, you're going to feel like a dream killer at the end. And so it's best to kind of just be realistic before having the student apply. And then always starting early with the essays, applications, college visits, I find to be really helpful. And then in the junior year, right now is a great time to begin thinking about what teacher you want for a letter of rec. But then I recommend asking in the springtime. And then you want to have them in 2 different academic subjects. So you don't want to have 2 math or 2 science. You want to make sure they're in a different subject areas and potentially like more advanced classes like AP. But if I've sometimes even seen a positive, if maybe a student really is struggling in one of their classes and has been earning a B, but has been having to really work hard, is going in and showing and is meeting like almost every week with that teacher and has developed a really great relationship with that teacher because they're putting in the work. Even if that grade is a B, it could be really positive because then college admissions could see a great letter of rec coming from that teacher saying, this student came in and really worked hard and I've seen their improvement. And then they kind of go, oh yeah, that's the class they got the B in and they were working hard. Okay, so it kind of will help to explain that any kind of discrepancy with grades too. And just being involved in activities and clubs is important too. So, being engaged, it's not just in learning, but also just in the community, in the school, and because that is going to show more of a commitment and likelihood to be engaged on their campus. And I think that's everything for today.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jen. This was super helpful. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm curious. Well, how about it, Sam or Brooke? Do you have any specific questions? Or not Brooke? Karen.
No, I really appreciate all the information. You do this one-on-one as well?
I do. I have a team that I work with, and we have a few different options. So I work with students one-on-one, or we work with students one-on-one. We also have, I've launched an online course as well, just so that way for a very motivated, driven student, they can have access to resources and support. And I give them a college list, and then access to all these different modules that they can work through. And then that's for a junior. In the summer, then we also will have like 4 live sessions in a group together, and that's at a more discounted rate. So sometimes I find that some students don't need that full one-on-one support. The online course can be helpful too.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Very helpful. You're welcome.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, Jen, I think you answered all of my questions in stream of things. This was super helpful. I really appreciate it. This is all being recorded. I'm gonna share it with everybody. And yeah, thank you so much again. I really appreciate your time. This was super helpful.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Michael.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you very much, both of you.
You're
You bet.
Right.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to stop recording.